As much as we admired Daniel Craig's iconic tenure as James Bond, that era has officially come to an end. Now the burning question remains, who will step into the legendary role of 007? Even under the threat of a laser aimed at them, Bond producers would likely keep their lips sealed. Their tradition of tight-lipped secrecy surrounding the casting process is as steadfast as ever. Still, a handful of strong contenders have risen to the surface. Idris Elba was a longtime favorite for the role, but he has consistently ruled himself out of the running. Meanwhile, fresh talents like Theo James, Callum Turner, and Damson Idris have all captured attention. Though in true Bond style, perhaps they'd prefer their interest stirred rather than shaken. One name that seems to be edging ahead, however, is Aaron Taylor-Johnson. Rumors have linked him to the franchise for some time. Last year, The Sun reported that he had quietly auditioned for the role, and more recently, there have been claims that he's even been offered the part. Of course, such rumors should be taken with a pinch of salt, or perhaps enough to garnish a martini glass. Taylor-Johnson may not be everyone's immediate pick for the iconic Walther PPK, but let's not forget that Daniel Craig wasn't the obvious choice back in 2005 either. Fans initially pushed back against his casting, some objected to his blonde hair, and even Craig himself hesitated. Yet he ultimately redefined the character and set a new standard for the franchise. So as we speculate on Bond's future, one thing is certain: the next 007 could surprise us all. Here's our breakdown of who might and who should take up the mantle of James Bond. Paapa Essiedu, the new kid on the block. Why? Well, he's a bloody good actor for a start. Having first come to light in Michaela Coel's I May Destroy You back in 2020, Essiedu's stock has exploded over the last couple of years, picking up starring roles in the likes of Alex Garland's Men and dystopian sci-fi show The Lazarus Project. His performance in A Number at the Old Vic, opposite The Walking Dead's Lenny James, was heralded as one of the best of the year across theaterland. Why not? There are a couple of obstacles. Firstly, one should think that the Bond producers will be looking for a more established name for the next 007, especially if he's only brought in to do 1 or 2 films, as has been speculated. Harry Styles, could Bond save his acting career? Why? Harry Styles' acting career hasn't had the best start. Although starting strong with a small role in Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk that left us wanting more, the more he gave us in 2022's Don't Worry, Darling and My Policeman didn't quite hit the mark. Still, God loves a trier, and what better training than MI6? Bond needs an injection of something new, fresh and young to carry on working into the future, and never underestimate the power of Harry Styles fans putting their bums firmly in cinema seats. Why not? As we said, his acting just isn't great. Yet, he also might just be too young and too good-looking. If the next James Bond has to be rugged and dangerous, maybe Harry isn't the man for the job. Add to that his introduction to the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Eros, and it looks like Mr. Styles might be unavailable for the next 10 years. Harris Dickinson, the Kingsman and Baby Girl star, boasts all of the suave sophistication one might wish for from a potential Bond. Why? A shapeshifter of a performer, Harris Dickinson has done it all by his mid-20s. He's led a major franchise installment in The Kingsman. Why not? He's only 28, which would historically prove a touch too young to play the grizzled super spy. But if he keeps up his present momentum, it's hard not to see how he won't be at the center of the conversation in 5 or 10 years, assuming the slot isn't filled by a long-timer. Idris Elba. The star of The Wire and Luther has long been a front-runner, but reports suggest he's not actually that interested. Why? Amidst all the other names that are thrown around, Idris Elba's has been the one that keeps seeming to crop up. And unsurprisingly, given he is the perfect fit for the Bond criteria, tall, ridiculously attractive, magnetic, we had further evidence that the pendulum had finally swung fully towards Elba, much to our delight, a couple of years ago, with Barbara Broccoli, the franchise's producer, quoted as saying Elba is part of the conversation for the role. Why not? Quite simply, the moment may have passed. Elba is 51, only 2 years younger than Daniel Craig at the end of his tenure. His age has been the biggest factor in the argument against Idris Elba, And if this were the reason for him to miss out on playing one of the biggest roles in Hollywood, and for us to miss seeing him on our screens, we'd be less than impressed. Jamie Dornan. The golden torso isn't just a pretty face and torso. Why? Many might primarily associate him with either a brilliant performance as the Fall's first villain, serial killer Peter Spector, or controlling BDSM fan Christian Grey. Aspects of both characters, oddly, fit nicely with the Bond profile. Why not? One major pitfall of helming a commercially successful film franchise is that you run the risk of moviegoers linking you to a previous role. Would Dornan be able to shake off the 50 Shades association and bring the Bond audience along for the ride? Jonathan Bailey. Perhaps a left-field option, but Bailey has all the skills in his locker to take on 07 and make the role his own. He might have been one of Bridgerton's biggest stars, but Bailey has a strong acting pedigree through theater and TV. Why not? At 35, some might think of him as still too young to take on the mantle of the experienced, gruff Bond. However, Daniel Craig was 38 when he started, George Lazenby was 29 when he took the role, and Sir Sean Connery was a youthful 31. Bond author Ian Fleming also puts 007 at 37 in Moonraker, so it's getting pretty close to just right. Tom Hardy, arguably, the acting talent of his generation. Why? He's box office, pure and simple. How many actors could pull off a one-man film, as Hardy did in Locke, and then play both leading roles in another, aka Legend? For our money, Hardy physically resembles Fleming's Bond and would bring a dangerous edge and devastating talent. Why not? Bond might be too mainstream for the independent-minded Hardy. He likes creative freedom, as roles in Locke, The Drop in London Road attest. His blockbuster works with Nolan were both one-off appearances, not recurring franchise roles. Plus, Hardy might have found his ideal franchise in the inventive, critically acclaimed Mad Max. Bond may want Hardy more than Hardy wants Bond. Tom Holland. Can one actor play both Bond and Spider-Man? Why? He wants, for a start. While lots of actors play coy when it comes to openly admitting they would leap at the chance to don the tux and pick up the Walther PPK, Tom Holland appeared on Variety's Awards Circuit podcast a couple of years ago and confirmed that he was very keen on taking on Bond. Why not? There are very few arguments against him, but the main sticking point has to be his youth. Holland is in his mid to late 20s and still plays lots of characters who are teenagers. Bond is typically a veteran with years of experience under his belt, and Holland might be better off waiting to become the next but one, or even two, Bond. Richard Madden. The leading man in the BBC's smash hit Bodyguard has the jawline and the skill set. Why? Any prospective Bond has to prove they can play seduction and espionage in equal measure. And Richard Madden has done that repeatedly. As both hopeless romantic and war hero Robb Stark, why not? It's not so much about his suitability and more about what Madden told us when he was our cover star. The papers make up a story on a Sunday so they can discredit that story on the Monday so they can sell papers on both days, he told GQ. I don't want to curse anything by saying anything. I think that's the curse of that. If you talk about it, you'll curse it. But he did admit he's a big fan of Bond, so if he's approached, it sounds like it would take a lot for him to say no. Luke Evans. The GQ readership pick. Why? Look at him. Lose the mustache, trim the hair, and you have James Bond sprung from the pages of Fleming's novels. Fast and Furious 6 proved his action credentials, while the stoically heroic Bard from The Hobbit is the James Bond of Middle-earth, only duller and a little grubbier. But it's his titular role in Dracula Untold that really sells the prospect of Luke Evans as James Bond. 007. He's established, but hardly a megastar, and at 45, Evans could nail down the role for a decade. Not to mention he won our last GQ poll for the preferred next James Bond. What better endorsement can you have? Why not? Despite his growing profile, the Evans candidacy hasn't yet caught fire with the bookies. Strangely, a lack of television experience may prove a drawback. Whereas most names on this list build up their profile on the small screen, Evans has always been a theater or film man, his part in Netflix's The Alienist notwithstanding. As a result, he may be more unfamiliar to a British audience than somebody with his success deserves. However, he certainly has a passionate fan base and may well be better placed than the odds indicate.